4 units on the island weren't capable of fighting an invasion and that there mightn't be enough time to draft in help. In America, government officials have told the president to stop supplies to the Allied air bridge to Iceland. Speaking from the White House, Helena Campbell says that it's too dangerous to continue with the support transfers when the early warning system in the North Atlantic region is under threat. We'll be bringing you up to date on the war situation as it evolves. Allied forces have intercepted Russian bombers in Icelandic airspace. Here's more from Bob Harris in Iceland.
There was a ferocious air battle across the island, the outcome of which is unclear. The Allied forces put all their might into defending against intensive bombing raids. Movement on the island has become difficult, and we expect a communications blackout at any moment. Bob Harris, Iceland.
Back in Europe, military experts have warned NATO leaders that this latest incident shows that Russia intends to launch a major invasion of Iceland. If it does, it would have major consequences for this war. In Brussels, there's been growing fear and public discontent. 13 people have been arrested. Jason Tansley reports.
Following a meeting of all NATO heads of state, the protesters showed their anger at their perceived lack of positive results from NATO. Ironically, the doomsday weapons that could halt the Russian advance are also the same weapons that could endanger millions of lives in Europe. And without direct support from the US, European countries need to rally together to protect from further attacks. Jason Tansley reporting.
The multinational force defending Iceland is reported to have attacked large numbers of Russian long-range bombers. ICE-4 are outnumbered, but they're flying the latest Eurofighter Typhoon aircraft. It's believed they've destroyed a number of Russians. Air defences have survived the significant bombardments by aircraft and cruise missiles. Intelligence sources have confirmed that Russian ground troops are now in almost total occupation of northern Norway and significant areas of Eastern Europe. Experience has shown NATO that air attacks alone won't be enough to stop the progress of the Russians. They also know it takes time to organise the Allied troops on a scale that makes them effective. That's it for now. We're back soon. More than 100 ships are known to have set sail from Russia on course for the invasion of Iceland. The massive fleet is reported to include destroyers, transporters and marine assault ships with hovercraft and helicopters. Military experts are urging NATO to react quickly against this latest offensive, but current commitments in Europe are hampering direct action. The Prime Minister is calling for backup from the US North Atlantic Fleet. There's been talk of the quality of ICE-4 and the elite Typhoon team, but against such attacks they'll have a tough fight on their hands. Bob Harris reports from Iceland.
The mood here is one of sheer determination to beat the odds. Despite the urgency of the situation, NATO leaders have been unable to satisfy requests for backup. The troops are nervous but willing to put up a good fight. Many here believe that NATO has abandoned Iceland, while others say that ICE-4 is ready and able to fight a decisive battle. All we can do is wait. Bob Harris, Reykjavik, Iceland.
RAF combat air patrols based in Scotland have detected fast-moving objects travelling across the sea off the coast of Norway. The previous reports of a huge vehicle assembly station have been confirmed, and the objects have been identified as chronoplanes, also known as Caspian Sea Monsters. The Caspian Sea Monsters that were originally designed to transfer troops over the Black Sea are water-skimming aircraft capable of carrying up to 150 fully equipped troops at speeds across calm waters. The new variant, first spotted by an RAF Nimrod last week, has been modified to cope with the rougher waters of the North Atlantic. It's believed the Spetsnaz commandos have already been landed on Icelandic soil in preparation for a major assault. Claire Montgomery, EBC News. There's been a wave of devastating attacks on Allied ships across the Northern Atlantic. More than 1,500 people are missing and presumed dead in what's been the most barbaric series of shipping attacks in modern times. It's thought the Russian submarine Yeltsin, which was responsible for the attacks on Allied supply vessels near Scotland, was also involved in the sinking of 5 ships and crippling another 10. NATO says that because of bad atmospheric and sea conditions, it's been difficult to keep track of enemy submarines. The Russian news agency has claimed a major victory, saying that the attacks will continue and intensify. Claire Montgomery from the EBC Newsroom. Intelligence experts have suggested that the elderly Russian submarine, the Yeltsin, responsible for the recent shipping attacks, has problems with its nuclear reactor and is likely to return to its base in the Kola Peninsula via Iceland. If, as suspected, the Yeltsin's carrying cruise missiles, it may attack Iceland as it passes by. Fears are that the missiles may be equipped with chemical or nuclear warheads. If the submarine is sunk, there are equal dangers of ecological disaster if either its reactors or payload is freed into the environment. An emergency summit is taking place in Brussels to discuss NATO's defence strategy. After recent reports, nobody can rule out the possibility of a chemical or nuclear attack on Iceland, but destruction of such submarines must be carefully calculated. Reports from inside Russia suggest there's a high level of public support for the recent actions, with television showing the results of successful military operations across Europe. In the meantime, large-scale battles are continuing in the air and on the ground, with untold casualties. Governments are advising civilians to stay undercover and stay put, hoping that millions will survive under occupation rather than perish trying to flee the fast-moving front line. In recent actions, Russian forces have driven a front across Poland stretching along the river Vistula. NATO forces have fought a successful holding and rearguard actions, allowing significant numbers of units to regroup in preparation for counterattacks. Claire Montgomery, EBC News. The Typhoon-class submarine Yeltsin has been sunk by icefall in the North Atlantic. It's believed the submarine, which was known to be having problems with its nuclear reactor, had surfaced and was destroyed by Typhoon fighters carrying Penguin anti-ship missiles. All 130 crew of the submarine are believed to have been killed. While this is a seeming victory for NATO, it's a long-term ecological disaster. The submarine and its nuclear reactors have now gone to the bottom of the ocean. Environmental experts expect it'll have major repercussions on ocean life across the North Atlantic for decades to come. Claire Montgomery from the EBC Newsroom. More details of the intense ground action in Europe are emerging. Another wave of Russian ground troops has started to move uncontested across parts of North and Western Europe. Up to 1 million soldiers are believed to be involved. There are calls on NATO to speed up preparations for defensive action, but some experts are saying it'll be impossible to put such a massive scale operation together fast enough. Claire Montgomery, EBC News. The Russian advance has been stalled at the Oder River in Poland. NATO forces are believed to have stopped the Russian offensive. Bridges over the river have been demolished and German and Polish armoured divisions are dug in and preparing for a counter-offensive. In light of the NATO successes, leaders are believed to be worried that the Russian administration may now have secret weapons waiting in the wings, in particular a nuclear device called Medusa's Child. Where gazing upon the mythical Medusa would turn an observer to stone, it's alleged that the new weapon will result in the complete destruction of all electronic devices over a wide area. The weapon could effectively freeze a war by depriving a force of its fighting technology. Russia has landed its first troops on Iceland. The attack, which has been anticipated for some time, was swift and violent. Assault forces were led by a group of fast hovercraft punching a landing corridor for their main invasion force through Allied defences. Russian units ashore are from a crack frontline landing force tasked to secure the beachhead. Allied forces on the island are preparing for a major conflict. Here's Bob Harris.
This message is brief as we're expected to get hit at any moment. The troops are as ready as they can be. The much-talked-about Typhoon fighters are already in the fray. There will be casualties, and there will be many. We will try to get reports out as and when we can. Bob Harris on Iceland.
NATO says the assault on Iceland will stretch Russian military forces, and if ISAF can put up a good fight, it'll buy much-needed time for Europe. In the meantime, the loss of Iceland will hamper US efforts to reinforce NATO efforts. Claire Montgomery, EBC News. Dramatic news has just come in of spectacular successes by NATO in Europe. We go now live to Brussels with a report on the first NATO daily briefing.
NATO have been successful in their defense against Russian forces. NATO is now attacking key military targets in Russia, primarily airfields and radar communications. Cruise missiles have been used to full effect and have already weakened Russian communication systems. When asked why NATO has not spoken about the attacks, Christopher Adams-Bailey said, "This is not a PR or marketing campaign. This is a war, and we don't want everybody to know exactly what our plan is. In order to be truly effective in such a serious situation, our strategy will be act first, talk later."
Russian tactical missiles are continuing to target military sites across Western Europe, including Britain, France and Germany. It's in support of air raids and major thrusts by armoured divisions. Although surface-to-air missiles are being used to defend against the attacks, their success rate's limited. It seems that official understanding of the scale of Russian capabilities has been seriously underestimated. New intelligence suggests that the Russians have been stockpiling weapons for a number of years, potentially in preparation for such a major event. Claire Montgomery, EBC News.